I'm Jesper and I'm taking on a challenge. I want to make a beautiful table using only free recycled materials. I'm inspired by Morley and his success in making tables from pallet wood, and I want to see if I can beat him at his own game. I'll be sharing my process, the tools and the materials I'm using, and also all the mistakes I'm making along the way. This video is also sponsored by Squarespace, and I hope to sell this table on my new website. So buckle up and let's see if we can pull this off. So, Morley found his pallets on Facebook Marketplace, but I got a call from the owner of this ice cream shop that is currently closed for the winter. He had a few pallets that he asked me to pick up. He said they would be somewhere at the back. Oh, there they are. This one is from Turkey and the other one is Russian, I believe. Let's see how easy they are to take apart. So, pallet with blocks, I always hammer the blocks off. The pallet from Turkey was pretty solid. I actually broke some of the stringers and blocks, a lot of them actually. Those Turks are some tough ones. The Russian pallet just disintegrated with absolutely no resistance. After the blocks are gone, the next step is getting the big nails out. The easiest way to do it is shooting the nails out with one of these denailer tools. Before I got this tool, I cut the nails short and hammered them out. With the big nails out of the way, there are only some smaller nails left, and it is pretty easy to separate the top boards from the stretchers. Instead of twisting the boards apart with a crowbar, I'm just pushing the stretcher off with a piece of wood. I realize it looks like I have gained a lot of weight, but I'm just wearing a lot of clothing underneath my shirt here. The temperature in my shop is just around freezing, and it is very expensive to run the electric heater, so I'll just adjust my clothing. So with the boards denailed, I decided to give them a rough planing with my little lunchbox thicknesser. The weather cleared up a little, so I headed outside to do it. After a rough surface planing, I took the boards to the table saw to clean the sides. I was also wondering what the tabletop should look like, and I also watched this guy making cutting boards from really thin strips of wood. So hey, I figured why not make a whole tabletop the same way. Watching this cutting board video turned out to be a real disaster for my project later. So I cut all the pallet boards into 3 cm strips and lined them up against each other. The Russian pallet is really white and the Turkish is a little bit more orange. And I remembered I had these African wood deckings that I got for picking them up. That means for free. So why not unite the whole world? And I cut the decking board into 4 strips and then I started gluing it all together. Because of the low temperature, I took it inside to dry overnight, and the very next morning or something, this oversized cutting board tabletop is very much glued together. I have 2 different sanders from Festool, and the one with the number 5 on it is more aggressive in removing material. So I mount an 80 grit sandpaper on it and get to work. I really love the meditating aspect of sanding, but I mostly meditate on how to get a big drum sander in my shop to do all the rough sanding work. If you have any ideas, please let me know in the comments. There's this trend going around among makers where they sharpen pencils with band saws, axes, blades, table saws, even pencil sharpeners. I tried sharpening with my sander, but I really can't recommend it. This is probably where I should have stopped the project and just added some more sanding and some finish, put legs on and tried to sell the thing. But that was not what this dumbass was up to. You see, he had seen this cutting board video where... So last night I rewatched the woven cutting board from Fisher's shop, and I thought I would just put in some woven dark wood into my tabletop cutting board. All you need to do is just cut up your project and glue it back together. So I cut some thin strips of the dark decking board. I had a voice in the back of my head saying don't do this, but my frontal lobe and my hands totally ignored all incoming warning signals and found the jigsaw. I realized that putting a few thin strips into the tabletop would just look ridiculous. I was just beating myself up inside and thinking I should cut it all into firewood so I at least could keep warm.
When you try your best but you don't succeed.
But then I came up with a whole new strategy for covering up gigantic woodworking mistakes. And that is to keep going and pretend it is not a mistake. So this is between you and me now. So with the table cut in half, it was way easier to bring it over to the bandsaw, because that is what you do with tables. The line I cut in the middle, let's call it the path. And now I just need to cut a lot of other paths in this table and essentially make a giant puzzle, because that was what I had planned all the time, sort of. Now I'm just testing my puzzle solving skills. For the next step, which I planned all the time, I'm gonna need to build a little something. I have this old water damaged chipboard and a battery powered circular saw that just cut... Oh, you need to charge those. With the water damage cut off, I divide the rest into a bottom and 4 sides. I do that on the table saw, now that I have one. Before this I used a track saw. Before that I used a handsaw. Before that I just used Jedi mind tricks. This thing wobbles in all directions, but hopefully it will straighten up when I assemble it. I cover it with some tape and put a silicone cork where all the boards come together. Come together, right? I'll just see myself out. I let the cork dry overnight and I came back the next morning to put on this release agent that I luckily had laying around. I still had the stop block on my miter saw from cutting the short sides of the mold, so I cut some pallet wood at the exact same length and added to this confusing mix. I mean totally planned mix of things, because apparently wood floats in most liquids. I just checked to see if I have time to do an epoxy pour, and it seems there is time. I have seen a lot of videos with people pouring epoxy, and the problem is always cooling the shop down so the epoxy doesn't overheat while curing. So I don't give the temperature in my shop much thought, at least not until a few days later, where the epoxy is still wobbly and jelly. I got in touch with Epodex, and apparently the temperature shall be over 10 degrees and it is best around 15 degrees Celsius. That's not Fahrenheit, in case you were wondering. I live in a civilized country where 0 means freezing and 100 means coffee is ready. Easy to remember. So without starting any camera, I rushed the table to its new drying place under my desk in my office. After a few days of smelling my feet, the epoxy is cured. I need to refill the rivers in this weird river table, I guess. So I mixed up a little more epoxy. After a few days I checked in on the project, only to realize that my floor isn't level. The new epoxy had gathered at one half of the table. I turned it around and repeated the process. While it was curing, I received some packages. The good folks at Sorter Shop had seen my homemade flattening jig, they probably had a good laugh, and they reached out and suggested I could try out the new slab matrix and see if I liked it better. We'll get to that. My little river table, or maybe I should call it the small streams labyrinth table, had finally cured, and the weather had shifted from freezing to foggy. It's finally time to unpack and flatten this table. And in terms of competing with Morley Kurt, I think I'm behind on points. I have spent way more time than planned, and the wood may be free, but then I added 5 liters of epoxy resin to the equation. And that stuff is not cheap. Also epoxied my hold-down pallet clamps down to the table itself, so they are kind of difficult to remove. After some hammer action, I bring out my electric plane and take them down to the epoxy surface. Last night I was trying to figure out how to hold the table down to the worktop while flattening it. It's kind of thin, so I had to be creative. My solution was to bring out my biscuit joiner and cut some slices in the sides of the table. Then I use washers and screws to clamp it down to the work surface. It is time to try out my new flattener here, the Slab Matrix. I just realized this tabletop is so thin it would be really difficult to flatten it with my homemade jig, which is not that precise. The first round of flattening took off the excess epoxy at each end, and I'm lowering the bit a few millimeters and giving it another round. On the third tour, I'm down to the bare wood all over the tabletop. I should mention that I need to mount dust extraction on this slab matrix, and the company making it strongly recommends doing so. I'm turning it around and giving the bottom a flattening too. And I'm actually pretty impressed with the precise flattening I'm able to do here. I have a big table coming up and I'm really happy I have this jig now. I'm cutting the table to size on my table saw. I mean, a table saw must be for cutting tables, right? I sanded out the router marks with this Festool No. 5 sander and some 8 grit sandpaper. There are some chip outs in the epoxy that I fixed with some CA glue and some chip outs in the wood that I fixed with wood filler quick. I'm really behind on points when comparing to Morley Kurt's build because I used epoxy. On the other hand, Morley spent money on the legs for his table, so I figured I could use some free legs and save some money. A while back I found this old Singer sawing table at our local recycling station, and I think the metal base could work as the base for the table. I'll just take it apart and restore the base. I'm also really running out of time here, because the video needs to be uploaded at a certain time. After sanding the CA glue and the wood filler down with 180 grit, it is time to start the finishing process. First step is making sure the wood is totally clean from wood dust, and one of the best options I have come across is raw wood cleaner. Then I'm mixing up some ruby monocoat oil plus 2C pure. This wood finish comes in a lot of colors and also a clear one, which is called pure. The oil can be used as it is, but if you mix it up with the accelerator, it cures in just a few hours and can be used after 48 hours. And it only needs one application. This really fits my desperate need of getting this table finished soon. But will I be able to sell the table and make a profit before the video goes live? I hope so. Instead of calling this a river or small streams table, I think I will call it the Pathfinder table. Society wants us to take the straight highway and be a really efficient citizen. But the best life is often found when we take the lesser traveled roads and find our own path. And there are so many if we just dare to look for them. I hereby call you the Pathfinder table. The table has been finished for a day and put for sale online. But I didn't sell it to anyone yet. I'm also thinking maybe it was a dumb idea to try and compete with Morley on this, as he is obviously very good at promoting and selling his projects on social media. So I have decided to give the table away to one of my biggest supporters, my mother-in-law. So I took the finished table to her, and it was immediately taken into use as her new sewing and work desk. I really couldn't be happier, because she has supported my woodworking ambitions more than I can describe with words. So with this one closed off, I'm heading home to start on a new project. But then I remembered that I didn't close the online advertising of the table just yet, so I'm literally advertising something that I don't have anymore. There's a word for that kind of thing that I wouldn't like to be accused of, so I'd better take it down immediately.